Let's discuss.
Hey everyone, it's Rachel back again with another video, and today I'm going to be checking out the album The Death We Seek by Currents. I have covered all of the singles on my channel as well as a decent amount of Currents. They are one of my favorite bands. The first video I ever did on my channel was a Currents video when Monsters dropped. That is when I started my channel, so we are now on the next album cycle. We've covered all the singles. I am very excited. I do think The Death We Seek is still a bar for me in terms of this record, but there are some things I'm hoping to see that we haven't seen yet in the singles. Regardless, I have very high expectations for this. I'm expecting it to be a top album for me this year. I would be completely surprised if not, but we will see what happens. I will link any sort of physical copies of the record, merch, all of that stuff, support links, social media in the description of this video. Thank you for the team over with Currents for getting this over to me in time to make a video. Other than that, I'm going to stop talking and we are going to get straight into it. And the ones that I have on my channel, I won't do the whole video on for, but they are on my channel. Such a killer track. That lead. This live crazy. Tuesday. First new song. This is starting off.
I know that you are trying to chase me. You'll never know what life may need. When our eyes, the others fall, we've come to face our crime.
Brian's high. That's it. Never mind, Ryan's lows. That's a line. Yeah, I'm definitely messing with his main rib. That's him too. Woo, get a little two-step going at the Burn Show. Oh, my hands are so sweaty. That does not happen. That's a lie in the anime. Wow, the pairing of The Death We Seek, the title track, and that one. Whoo! Alright, unfamiliar, new music video. I did put it on the channel. Shout out to Sharp Tone for getting this to me. His intro riff is... I'm living in tragedy.
Navigating the foolishness, but suddenly you're all what you want. I can offer even now on this road.
I am not over living in tragedy. What a track. I love this place. This is also on your channel. The opening of The Death We Seek and Living in Tragedy is, I cannot emphasize how hype the beginning of the record is enough. This track and Remember Me, I've tried to listen to a little bit less than I can the title track.
Control is fading out. More
what kind of approach that is with those like background vocals there, but I love the way it sounds. I'm not sure what kind of. I don't know anything about vocal production. Singing over this hard ass outro. Ooh, are we ready for another new track? Vengeance. Oh yeah, I was about to mention them and I got distracted. But Vengeance, I think, falls in between like my plays for The Death We Seek. I have listened to a ton more. I have been waiting for you. That's the riff. Everything about this world is shades and revolves. Pick up the ashes like rain. Walk your love through the IRA. Oh! Forever now, intoxicated. Oh, I love that. Pick up the ashes and rain. Walk your love is obsolete. Separation led to an all-time state. Divorce from our reality. Finally lost the will to fight. Then my whole life slipped away, only to find myself undone. I always love the production for kill it. They're using those like layered vocals with the screaming back there so well. Trying to get a rip on this. It kills me. That's pretty. Anyway, what I was saying was Vengeance is like the in-between. I listened to The Death We Seek a ton. Vengeance ended up getting a lot of plays for me. And then I tried to cool it with like Remembering Zilla. kinda low in there. Oh. Why do I love that so much? Ryan. Let's These layered vocals are everything.
Something's coming this way, sinking inside into the lives we've lost. Taste the blood of your swords. Yeah, taste the blood and get a sense of the other side. Get to run when your reality's gone. Yeah, taste the blood and get a sense of the other side. Get to run when your reality's gone. A mind deceived, a lie we lived. We're offered a love for the loveless. Beyond this road, there's another road we can carve out for ourselves. We can't be sold, breaking down the walls that divide us from good dreams. Taste the blood, become one with God.
Wow. Living in Tragedy over and over, definitely my two favorites so far. But that
Voices rebel outside, dark marks behind our masks. Senseless execution, no mistakes and no forgiveness.
this track grew on me so much. I never disliked it. None of these singles have I disliked at all. I don't think it's the same when you have things that maybe you want when you're looking forward to an album, like maybe you want to see that you haven't yet.
I never wanted to be a victim. I thought I could rise above.
That part is one of the things that like clicked for me when I was like, I was listening to this track and I was like, let me put this on repeat. And that was one of the things. It was like some of the chug, some of the giddy up the song has. But anyway, this is my second favorite. I think So Alone is so close to the title track that I think I'd put Venice and maybe then So Alone. But I really dig all of them.
There's nothing I can say.
crying. Oh. That's... Do they have to watch and sing on the scores? Yeah. I'm pretty sure. Hell yeah, we've been waiting. And this goes into Remember Me, and then we'll be at the closer already. Remember Me, I love the chorus. I think after The Death We Seek, Remember Me has my favorite chorus out of the singles. So obviously my favorite singles, even the ones that were lower in that ranking, I still really take them, so it's not like there was anything else. Now I'll be able to play this track a lot more, and this is one of the ones I tried not to run into the ground before the album. And Brian's vocals can be really I can sense it, I'll convince myself that the world I love is gone. The blood is on the walls, the damage has been done. We carry the weight of selfless scars, we silently crave upon a pedestal. I pretty much listen to all of these in a perspective of imagining them playing live in my head, like. This song is definitely a good indicator to not the really unique vocal version of this album, not just from Brian and Steven, but some of the choices that they made, their backing vocals, we're talking about. Outro time. On that face. Another. Thank you. Currents, the death we seek, let's discuss. I am very happy with this. I think with the singles on the table, it was like, this is Currents. It's definitely going to be an album that I like, but it's still an album that I love. I think that the space between the singles filled in incredibly well, as ideally as, maybe not as, you know, there are things that I have loved in their discography that they've probably moved on from and stuff, so they're not going to make an album specifically for me, but the things that they've done, the changes that they have made, I really like the way they've translated in this record. You can tell, like, in the songwriting and in certain things, like having Chris Wiseman on, you can tell that's Chris Wiseman, and that's in the, I'm pretty sure, I'm going to sound dumb if it's not Chris on Gone Astray, but I'm 99% sure. Even the beginning, like those first few moments as you're hearing the vocals, like it sounds like someone else, but then you hear it's very much Brian. So he's got some range even within just the singing realm, not looking at his entire voice. When you look at the bigger picture of his entire voice, there is so much improvement. With this, I think the drums, like in terms of production, they still sound just the same. Like everything comes across really clearly, but it feels just a little bit different. It's just got a little bit of almost like a different style, and I'm not sure if that's just because this is the album. Like I started playing the drums a little bit, watching a lot of drum playthroughs, learning the terminology, trying to learn the drums in between like releases, so that wouldn't be something I was actively paying attention to as much upon first listen of The Way It Ends or The Place I Feel Safest or anything prior in their discography. The kicks and Into Despair, I think anybody would be able to point out that that's like a very big part of the song, so I think that's a little bit different. Just a little bit of like a stylistic difference, it feels like, but I could be a little bit off. I definitely would say there's some stuff here that we have not heard from Currents, and they've leaned so much more into utilizing Brian's vocals to like the full ability, not just having like, okay, here are some clean parts, here are some screams that are really like all over the place in terms of like those, it sounds like he's perfected not only the highs but the lows, mid-range, all of that sounds phenomenal. But you also have those parts of the record where it's layered, and I talked a lot about that in the video because it kept pulling my attention, and I was like, that sounds so different than, it just felt like a different choice than I hear, and all the music that I consume on the channel, on the live streams and stuff. I think that there's like an average of stuff that you hear a lot, stuff you don't hear that much. The way they approached a lot of the vocal work in this, it just stands out to me. I think in terms of choruses and some of the, not even just the choruses either, just some of the melodies that you get here, the album feels very cohesive. And I think when we get to stuff like that, there's been a few albums that we've listened through in the last few years that have felt that way, and so I found that some people love that, and it feels like if it differs enough otherwise, some people love that, some people don't love that and want something a little bit different. I felt like Gone Astray was definitely a different style on the chorus, but there is a lot of stuff that feels, not only with the vocal work or the melodies too, but I think when you look at like some of the melodies in the guitar work, some of the stuff that you're hearing there, it feels very cohesive. And I would argue that not from a chorus or a melody standpoint vocally, but in the same way on Invent Animate Heavener, they have this clean guitar on the record that's in a ton of the songs, the majority of them, and it gives that same feeling of like a very cohesive release that's sort of like an experience to go through front to back, if that makes sense. Guide Us Home is just an incredible track as well. So I think for me, the standout tracks, Living in Tragedy, Over and Over has my riff in it. That intro riff is what I really wanted. Like obviously not like, oh yeah, I could imagine this exact riff, because Chris Wiseman does all of that, but it's kind of scratched the itch of what the itch that I had mentioned in a few, I think the last two videos maybe I did single-wise. I was saying I don't want like reused, obviously I'm not expecting them to make the same album again, and I never would. The Place I Feel Safest will always be one of my favorite records. The Way It Ends, also a phenomenal record. I think that the issue that we often have, I'll try not to talk too much about this since it's like a little bit off topic, is people expecting like the same releases rather than going into it. Something I really learned through doing the channel and reviewing stuff and diving into it is it's much easier on you as the listener if you go into it, what do I like and dislike about this, not being like, oh, I want this to be exactly like this. Now, of course, like me going into this wanting some like just kind of a riff that did for me sort of think of Shattered off of The Place I Feel Safest. That's one of my favorites. I know everybody loves the Better Days riff. I don't necessarily want that exact thing, but I want the riff that gives me that feeling, if that makes sense. And they did so much work elsewhere on this record that it really wasn't it wasn't a super hard an acceptance. Like, some bands make big changes, and when you go into that and you're like, I need to just see what I like and what I don't like, and remember that my old albums still, this is not that case for me, So okay, I'll leave that where that is, because I could talk way too much about that, and it goes way beyond Currents into just talking. So I would get off on a tangent, and we don't need that in this video. I don't think that they could have opened the record up better than pairing the title track with Living in Tragedy. Living in Tragedy stands out for me. It's a wild ride of a song. It's got such a heavy and a groove that like seared into my brain the first time I heard that song. But not only that, I feel like you get a good amount of what's to come on the record with that song. It's sort of, I don't want it all over the place to sound like a bad thing, but that song, it shows off Brian's vocals, especially from a screaming standpoint. I think we've got a lot more singing than we've ever gotten in Currents, really, with this album. But from a screaming perspective as well, that shows off some progress as well. As I was mentioning before, the range is just sounding very polished from any way you look at it, I guess. Highs, lows, mid, all of that sounds just stellar. And I couldn't even pick a favorite part of that track. The synth was something that immediately like struck me, and I was like, wow. In the record, it's sprinkled in there very nicely. I don't think it was like, because it's something I feel like, I would get carried away with, because I'm like, wow, that sounds so nice. I feel like, I'm not sure if it's because it's my first listen and I was paying attention to other things, but there was really one track, and I can't remember at this point which one it was, that really had more like a more atmospheric moment that stood out to me. But a lot of this felt a bit like the focus wasn't quite in like the use of the instrumentals to create that. It was almost like a vocal approach. I don't know how to really explain it, I guess, with only one listen on this album, but that would definitely be something I would note going into my second listen to pay attention to, like, I don't want to say comparing as like, I'm gonna compare this so I can like shit on this record. I don't mean in that way. I mean just so I can understand like what it is that like popped up in my mind as being a bit different. For me, Living in Tragedy may be my favorite non-single, but I definitely need some more time. Over and Over has like that intro that I was talking about, that has the riff that I was waiting for, the riff that I was looking for. It's just wacky. It's I don't know what it is about that sound, but I just love it. We've got Beyond This Road. I feel like almost got overshadowed for me a little bit, just because of how I kept thinking about the beginning of Over and Over, something I'd like to listen to over and over. Vengeance, Gone Astray is a standout track for me. Having Chris Wiseman do some vocals on the record, we've been waiting for it too, because I know Chris does vocals in Shadow of Intent, his other band. We've all known that and been kind of waiting to see how they may utilize it or may not in Currents. So the moment you hear it, it's kind of like a moment to note, I guess, as well. I think Guide Us Home will be my second, like right up there with Living in Tragedy. That track knocked me on my ass. There were so many parts of it that just felt emotional, and then I was saved. I was about to cry because there was that part where it was like almost gang vocal sounding. I'll need to go back and re-listen to it, and it was just tearing me up with those lyrics. But we got to that part where the bass just comes blasting through, and it like made me all excited again, and I was like, no, I'm not gonna cry. As the song carried on, we went back into the chorus and stuff. I was like, okay, now I do feel like I may cry again, but briefly I was distracted from that feeling. So it's an album that makes you feel something. It's an album that's very cohesive. I think it has quite a few different things from Currents. I think this will be something where it will depend on how able people are to let go of certain things in a band's sound and letting them move forward and focusing on different things. I think the things that they were trying to focus on here are very evident. It feels like, even though there are things that connect each song, like melodies, what I was mentioning before, as something that seems to really make them kind of click together. There are certain guitar, like little leads that I'll hear that I'm like, oh, that sort of sounds like this track, and it just gives you like a reminiscent of a different song on the album. But structure-wise, songwriting-wise, it feels like they really tried to put everything into it there. I think with The Way It Ends, I was in love with the tracks. I was in love with Split, Origin, obviously Better Days, The Place I Feel Safest. I love everything on. Oh yeah. Okay, I'm not gonna list everything I loved off The Way It Ends, but for me it took a moment of adjusting, I think, a little bit. It was still something I played. It immediately went on repeat for me, collecting all the vinyl variants, all of that stuff. So I never want that to come across as like me being like, oh, because I have this one record that I love so much that I've emotionally attached my emotional support record. You can't. I think it's kind of hard to explain, but like everything that the time that you spend like revisiting a record and rerunning it and like memorizing all your favorite parts of it, making memories to it, listening to it with other people, all that stuff really adds a lot of value to like your favorite releases and stuff. So I do think it's fair to always, like, if you don't love it first listen and you're like, I can't believe this is, it's always good to give it another try a second time. There was, something I listened to recently that I was like, this is so different that I'm gonna turn it off for right now, and I'm gonna come back, less surprised later, and listen to it. And I can't for the life of me. It wasn't anything I made a video for, but it was something I was listening to on my channel. Anyway, with this, I'm happy. I don't think there will be very many songs. I can't 100% remember what Beyond This Road sounded like, and I think that might be the only one I don't have a clear memory of. So I'm not sure if that one will get as many plays as the rest of them for me, since I have like a clear impression from the rest of them that I can hear in my head. That I think speaks to me a little bit as that one being like a weaker track for me now, but oftentimes I'll find like a month later the track I said that about when after first listen is a more played one than something else. So I think just more time will be good for me to make a further assessment on it, but I am very happy with this. I'm not one to listen to an album one time and rank it in a band's discography, especially a band that's one of my favorites, so that would not be something I could do. I highly doubt, most things that come out this year could top something like The Place I Feel Safest by Currents for me, so that's never like the expectation I want to go into something like this, because I feel like it takes away for me too. Last finishing notes. To wrap things up, I will be doing a bunch of revisiting to this album. I don't really think there's anything on this that I will be skipping for right now. I'm sure as time goes on, some tracks won't be put on the playlist as often as others, but it'll be an album I'll come back to in full quite often. I've got favorite tracks for sure. Living in Tragedy over and over definitely stand out. Not only because of, I mentioned the riff and then kind of moved on, but the chorus on that track I love. That one kind of gives you the earworm vibe. I think that might be, it was a very strong track, and with the beginning of the record coming in the way it did, maybe that just overshadowed Beyond This Road for me, and with time or on its own, it will do more. I feel like it was not, it's bad when you're like, you have a track you remember because you disliked it. Not a problem for me, so I feel like it's just kind of been overshadowed, and that's what that is. Going into Vengeance from there, one thing I would say, Vengeance did have me a little worried as a single about one thing that did not end up being an issue at all, but it was like a production thing, because it just sounds so muddy in places to me, and none of the rest of the record really has that feel as I was listening through, and their discography definitely doesn't either. So that one does seem just the slightest bit out of place to me, because it has it's very straightforwardly heavy. It was the most aggressive single. It's one of the most aggressive songs. I think that's kind of sometimes a difficult like comparison to make, especially after listening to all these ones. There are some big breakdowns on this track, but I'm not sure that anything else is like as straightforwardly aggressive and pissed off as that track, and I don't think that's what makes it kind of stick out either. It feels like a production thing. It just feels a little bit different. And I think for a record that is so it connects so well together, it's so, I'm overusing the word cohesive, but it's just the perfect explanation of how it feels. That one is the one that is kind of like, oh, okay, but it's not like a big issue. And I am glad that wasn't like a full approach with the record, because I much prefer the other parts. And that's not to say that the song itself, it's just some parts are really muddy to me, and in the opposite with the vocals on this record too. Brian's enunciation it's always been solid for me. It's not a band that I'm like, what did he say or anything, but it's only improved, I think, since he joined the band. It's only gotten better. I have talked a lot. I love this. I think I'm comfortable saying I love this. I had a few small not even concerns, just like, oh, okay, I should know that this, there may be some parts of this that aren't, but it was a hit for me. I'm gonna put this on the playlist, go listen to it now. Let me know what your favorite songs were in the comments, what you thought of the album. I will link all of the band's social media, all of their merch for the record, any sort of physical copies you can get in the description of this video. Yeah, and my link tree will also be there. That will have my Twitch, which I just started streaming on Twitch recently. In addition to streaming on YouTube, we'll still be doing our live streams here on YouTube Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and that is 7 p.m. GMT, I believe. And that sometimes may change, but that's the day that we normally plan. The Discord server invite link is in there. That's where the community is based for my YouTube channel. A lot of lovely people in there. And also my Patreon will be in there, and that about covers it. As always, thank you very much for watching. Shout out to Sharp Tone, shout out to Currents. I appreciate it.